Okay. This is interesting. Oh, okay. So, yes, I should be hopefully live. And I'll just try to paste my Skype in here. If that's still working, I guess it is. It's not going to paste there. Okay. Alright, now I have to open my Skype just in case somebody clicks the link. Okay. Now, the reason for this hangout, or this live stream, is because I was having a discussion with somebody about how can you tell if something is related or not. How can you tell something is a kind, the same kind or not? Which was a discussion that Mind Onion was bringing up, and I was trying to explain to the person how you can tell the difference between kinds that are related and kinds that are not the same kind, that are not related. So what I was able to do was to figure out, or to define how you can know what a kind is and what a kind is not, which is a good question. So as I proceeded to explain it, the person that's called Mind Onion, I'm not trying so much to highlight the person who was asking the question and having a hard time understanding, at least acted like had a hard time understanding, but to show that it consolidated pretty much what a kind is, because we know that chimps and humans are not the same kind, and because they have 20 to 30% genome that's not comparable. Now, before, when they came up with a 98% similarity comparison to chimps, that was because they weren't comparing the entire genome. They only compared the quote-unquote comparable parts of the genome, assuming or asserting that the other parts of the genome were junk DNA. So, which turns out not to be the case, because it's not junk DNA, because it has function, it has utility, which is another story. But anyway, so I came up with this way to find out which is a kind and which is not the same kind, which is related and which is not related. For example, we know we're not related to chimps because our Y chromosome is totally different, very different from chimps, very different from chimps. And of course, when/if you copy something, it's going to be the same or similar to what you're copying. So in other words, when you copy something, you're not going to have I give the example of an alphabet. If you copy the alphabet, parts of the alphabet are not going to say you don't get it. Because if you copy it, it's going to be the same or similar with slight variations. It's not going to have totally different information, and that's what we see between the chimp genome and the human genome, is that there's totally different information that chimps have that we don't have, and information that we have that chimps don't have. Totally unrelated information, just totally different. Okay, when you copy something, if supposedly we are copied from chimps or chimps DNA or whatever, we should expect to see the same information being copied. And of course there are similarities because everything is biological and everything has to grow and everything is made of protein, so we should expect to see similarities, and we should expect to see differences, especially in different kinds. So things that are of the same kinds are going to have the same information, only with different numbers of copies of duplicate information. For example, when you compare the Y chromosome between families, different families, you'll have different numbers of copies of the same information. So that's what they count. They count the different numbers of copies of the same information that is there. But what's not happening is you're not getting different copies of information that's totally different. The numbers of copies are different, but the information is the same information. They're duplicates. They're numbers of duplicates of the same information that's being counted. So when you go through and read the Y chromosome results, you're going to read a whole bunch of different numbers. And those numbers represent the differences in the numbers of copies of a particular thing in the Y chromosome. So, and the Y chromosome is passed between father and son, obviously, of course. That's why we're comparing the Y chromosome. So when you see someone that does a Y chromosome test and you're reading off the numbers and they're the exact same numbers of copies of information, is what the numbers represent. They're the same amount of copies of the information. So it could be, different things. I don't know about the Y chromosome, but when you talk about duplicates, it could be different copies of, say, the mechanism to make melanin. So if you have a bunch of copies, maybe you can make more melanin, or something like that. That's from what I understand. But anyway, in the Y chromosome, there are duplicates of the same information. Depending on what that is, what they do. So when you read somebody else's DNA chromosome and it's the exact same numbers as what you have of your copies of information, the exact same numbers of copies that you have, then you can know that that's a close relative. For example, I have two examples of a Y chromosome that is exactly the same numbers as mine, with the exception of two of the numbers. Two of the numbers are one place difference. And it's a whole string of numbers, like 64 numbers or whatever. And it could be as many as 111, which I have 111, but in this case it's 64 or something like that. That's being counted. So with 64 numbers, two of those numbers is one number off in each of the examples, and they are of course, there's two differences in those 64 numbers, and it's only like one number off between me and each of the other two, and between the other two themselves. They're different from each other by two numbers. So in other words, I have one difference. Well, it's actually two differences. I have two differences between each of them, but then they in turn have two differences from each other. So whoever their ancestor was is a close relative to my ancestor going back 300 years. So in 300 years, it was only like two mistakes, or two differences, not mistakes, two different number of copies between us in comparing 64 examples of copies of information. So that's that's how they do the Y chromosome test. But it's kind of scary when you're reading off numbers that are exactly the same as yours with minor exceptions. But anyway, the point being that when you copy something, it's going to be a copy with slight differences. You're not going to copy something and have it be totally different from what you're copying. I mean, it's not going to be a copy. So when you have a genome, and of course it's a lot of information, but if you have a genome that has information that's totally different, essential information, useful information that is totally different from the other genome, you can be sure that it's not related. It's not the same animal. In other words, it's instructed to be different, a different animal. Because between chimps and humans, there's 30 to 40% differences, depending on how you count, because there are obviously multiple ways you can count different information. Because like I just said, with the Y chromosome, you're counting the different numbers of copies. But it's copies of the same information, though. That's the thing. That's the difference. So it's not really a difference at all, because it's the same information that's represented. And we're only counting the differences, the different numbers of copies of the same information that everybody has. That's the difference. That's how you can tell what family you belong to. In other words, it's not really a difference. It's a different number of copies of the same information that everybody has in humans, with, of course, slight variations again. But you're not going to get, like what we have in chimps, is totally different information with different purposes and uses, and everything is totally different. Of course, it's gonna 20 to 30% difference is a lot of information that's different. It's different information. It's not just different numbers of copies of information. It's different information, which they excluded in the comparison when they came up with the 98% similarity between chimps and human. They were only comparing the comparable information. They weren't comparing the other. Okay, hi Jeffrey Zanzer. I wasn't paying attention. They weren't comparing the different information and how different the genomes are between chimps and humans. Let me read what Jeffrey Zander's saying. The only point you ever had is a tiny one on the top of your head. That's called irrelevant logical fallacy. Listening to pretend to science is hilarious in a sick and sad sort of way. That's also irrelevant and an illogical fallacy. Has nothing to do with anything that's being said. So try again. Anyway, incoherent rambling with even more incoherent rambling, you should stick to reading cereal boxes. That's still irrelevant, illogical, irrational. So, when you have totally different DNA, and I gave an example of totally different DNA, a totally different copy. The example would be like if you copy the alphabet, and when you read back the alphabet, parts of it says you still don't get it. That would be that would be a different information than what, if you compare it side by side, it'd be different information, so it's not a copy. If it says something totally different than what you're copying, it's not a copy. So when it's totally different like that, because chimps have a lot of instruction that we don't have, and we have a lot of instruction that chimps don't have. So we're not copied from each other. We don't have the same common ancestor because we have totally different information from each other. And it's not complicated. And if they were honest, they would have disproved evolution a long time ago in the classroom, and it wouldn't even be taught anymore. Which is the point that I'm making, is that evolution shouldn't be taught anywhere to anybody. And you notice Jeffrey Zanzer here, he's coming with attacks about me, trying to talk about me, which is totally irrelevant to the subject. Has nothing to do, doesn't prove anything, doesn't say anything, doesn't prove anything in regard to evolution. You haven't said anything with any relevancy to anything. This message held for review. He just said I'm an idiot, that's all he said. But anyway, which isn't too bad. I've had worse comments. Yes, I did say something with relevancy, is that we don't have the same instructions as chimps have. They don't have the same instruction as what we have. Okay, that's relevant. Now, you just lied. You just lied about what I said. I said I didn't say. You said I did. You called me a liar. Okay. You said I didn't say anything with relevancy. I just did. Who wrote the Bible? Here we go. The Bible is a compilation of different prophets who were inspired by the Holy Spirit to say things from God, give us truth from God. What day was your fairy tale born? It's not a fairy tale, it's an actual human history of people that you are related to, that you are descended from. Okay, so the real people, and who wrote the Bible is prophets. Let me change the scenery here. This owl is getting a little bit old here. What do I got here for scenery? Oh, I got these. Okay. Let me go with the bobcat. That was not an answer. Who wrote the Bible? Yeah, it was an answer. It's a compilation of different prophets who were inspired by the Holy Spirit to tell us different things, to give us different things. Who wrote the 4 Gospels? The 4 Gospels were written by the followers of Jesus. And of course there were copies of copies of copies of copies, and you can't know when the first copy was written because it didn't have a date on it. But we can be sure that it is information from the time of when the events occurred, so that we can know they are true, because of course they are in harmony with everything else that was said that was true about us needing the perfect provision, a Messiah covering for sin, that is perfect and that only God can provide for us himself. See, that's what the truth is. When? No, it wasn't. No, they weren't. You gotta like actually say something. You can't just like say nuh-uh. You have to like say something of substance, so that you know I can actually respond. The four gospels don't even agree on the same fairy tale. It's not a fairy tale. It's an actual event. Jesus walked in the temple portico when it was Hanukkah, in the time of Hanukkah. That was an actual event that happened. The only place Hanukkah is mentioned in ancient writings is in the Gospels. It said he was walking in the temple of Solomon, or the portico of Solomon, and it was Hanukkah. Yes, it is. No, he didn't. There you go with nuh-uh again. Nuh-uh. You can type a lot of nonsense and it doesn't prove anything. A lot of irrelevant words that don't actually say anything. So, but anyways, if you copy something, it's not going to say A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You don't get it yet. L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T. If it does, it's not a copy. You know it's not a copy. Somehow it got copied from something else. Show me any first person or contemporary evidence. You're just repeating the same old parrot talk that you hear from other people. You're not bringing anything new. The Gospels are copies of copies of copies, just like the rest of Scripture. You don't know when it was first written. You can only guess and estimate or guesstimate. And it's not endless babble, it's relevant truth. Relevant truth is that only your Maker can cover for you himself and remake you again from the inside out by the power of his true word, as no one else can. God made you, he can cover for you, he can remake you again. Nobody else can. You think genetic science is a Xerox. That's funny. No, the genomes are copied. The genomes are copied. They're copies. That's what they are. They're copies. Copies. That's what they are. Copies. Okay. There you go. You're cursing and swearing now, and your comments are not going through. So, there's that. Oh, just call me an idiot again. You're not proving anything. Just because you're proved wrong, that you're speaking nonsense, now you start attacking me, the messenger. It has nothing to do with the actual subject matter. So that's what you have to do when you're wrong. You have to resort to attacking the messenger instead of the message, because the message is accurate. You can't attack the message, so you attack the messenger, which is a logical fallacy, by the way. It proves that you don't have anything relevant to say. So thank you for that. Thanks for proving nothing. You can also tell me nothing. There's nothing you can tell me when you can prove nothing. See, the genome is a copy. It is a genetic copy. That's what it is. It's a copy. And if you copy something, it's not going to say something totally different. And if it does say something totally different, it's not a copy. That's the whole point. If you copy the alphabet and you look at it and it says A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you don't get it yet. H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. It's not a copy. Somehow some other information got inserted in It's not complicated. It's not complicated. Okay, here's some. You wouldn't recognize logic if it was tattooed on your forehead. That still doesn't tell me anything. Okay, you're still not saying anything, and there's nothing for me to respond to. You still don't get it. uh, Genes are not the alphabet. No, but it's information. The alphabet is in a certain order, and the genes are in a certain order. And the point is that when you copy the order, it's not going to say something out of order. It's not going to, and if it does say something completely out of order, it's a completely different information. It's not a copy. It somehow got information inserted, and you're not going to get information inserted from thin air. It doesn't happen. See, that's the whole point, and that's why you're cursing at me, because there's nothing you can say. Anyway, so yeah, that was a good example. The alphabet. If you copy the alphabet, it's not going to have information inserted there that it's not going to have information inserted that you didn't copy. And if you're looking at something with information inserted there that's not a copy, it's not a copy. The information is from somewhere else. Get that through your little head. It's not complicated. If you want to know what's related and what's not related, compare the evidence side by side. Compare the genome side by side. The genome has been sequenced in a lot of animals. Compare them side by side. And if there's information that's in one that's not in the other, and vice versa, it's not a copy. They didn't get the information from each other, and they didn't get the information from thin air. It's not complicated. Anyway, I gotta change the scenery again. There we go, jumping, which is an inside joke. Okay, I can only make fun of you because you're the poster child of willfully ignorant. Now, if I look up Jeffrey Zanzer, it's probably going to be a sock account, which is even more hilarious. But anyways, I don't even know if I want to bother to do that. Why should I even bother to do that? Let's see, where's the... I don't even know how to do this. I can't even, I'm not even going to bother to do that because I don't even know how to do it. Somehow I can't even do that here. Okay. Let me see something. Yeah, anyway, it's probably a sock account. It's probably one of the atheist object credit givers that is afraid to show his real identity. Because he doesn't want to get shown up, and he just wants to throw, whatever at me. And without proving anything or saying anything. And what I find amusing is that they actually think that they're taking away from my argument by doing so, when actually they're proving me right, so, because they have no argument. So thank you for telling me nothing. You can also, I mean, there's nothing you can tell me. Thank you for proving nothing. There's nothing you can tell me either. So it's quite amazing. Yeah, the evidence of creation is evident and scientific and factual, and it's easy to prove. All you gotta do is compare the genomes side by side. And if there's information, viable, vast amounts of information, like 20% of information that's different, that's information that the other organism doesn't have, and vice versa, then you know it's not a copy. You know they didn't get the information from each other. It's a different kind, different created kind, even though it might look the same. It might even look very much the same. If it's different information, it's not the same information, because when you compare Y chromosomes, you're comparing the number of copies of the same information. It's not different information. It's just different numbers of copies of the same information in the Y chromosome. That's what we're comparing. It's not different information between us. It's different numbers of copies of the same information. Which is a big deal, It's a big difference. So when different numbers of copies of the same information is not different information, it's the same information. It's identical information. It's just different numbers of copies of the same information. Now when the information is totally different, and it's essential for the organism to exist, then you know it's a different animal. It's a different living organism. It's a different kind of animals, because it's not a copy. It's not complicated. Now show the world your evidence of the global flood. See, I told you it was probably a soccer count. Yeah, the geology is the evidence of the global flood. 100 million cubic miles of geology, of consecutive layers of water deposited sediments over a mile deep around the world, with everything living on Earth at the time, with examples of everything living on Earth at the time of the global flood. It's not complicated. You should expect to find evidence of the global flood, and it's all there. It's all there. Everything that was living at the time of the global flood is buried there, below us. Still there. Can't get rid of it. It's over a mile deep. Some places 2 miles deep. It's all water deposited sediments with marine life, land animals, dinosaurs, mammals, all mixed in together. All mixed up together. So, anyways, I was just that. Just wanted to explain the difference between what is the same kind and related, and what's not related is a different kind. Because Kent Hovind said pine trees aren't related to elephants. So Mind Onion wanted to know how he could know that. So I spent like a half an hour trying to explain it. So I came up with the example of the of copying the alphabet. If you copy the alphabet and it says A, B, C, D, F, G, you don't get it yet, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, then you know that information was inserted and it's not a copy. So, it's not complicated. It's real easy. And evolution needs to be removed from the educational system because it's total nonsense. 100% useless rubbish. You shouldn't be taught to anyone. It's garbage. Not even worth spending the time talking about. So there's that. And I hope everybody has a nice day and enjoys the rest of the summer if you're in the northern hemisphere. And good day.